So hello everyone. Thank you for listening and looking at this video. So I am Marc Stoltz from Krav Maga Luxembourg. So today I'm thrilled. I have the honor to talk to CJ Kirk, okay, one of the foremost Krav Maga experts in US. And as you know, perhaps he will have his first visit in Luxembourg and for a seminar. Thank you, CJ.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mark.
So really, thank you for coming and joining this interview. So we just wanted to have a quick snapshot with you about who you are and why Krav Maga matters so much for you. So and because you are from US and we are in Europe, so we want to bring you a little bit closer to all our listeners and our members.
Excellent. I'm happy to do that.
So just for the people who don't know it, we have this seminar on in our center with CJ, who will especially come to Europe and to Luxembourg the 28th and 29th June. So let's dive in.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So CJ, first, how you came to Krav Maga and what initially sparked you to grow into a lifelong passion for this?
That's a good question. I um, I was doing jujitsu after UFC one, and I was doing kung fu, which most people call kung fu, and I was finishing up college, and I was robbed at gunpoint in a parking lot behind a restaurant in Houston, here in Houston, Texas. And I remember the gun was pointed at me at my chest. I remember thinking, like, I got nothing. I don't know. I'm not trained for this. I've never even thought about the possibility that something like a gun defense would be possible. And in the aftermath of that robbery, I started searching. And I'd say somewhere in the 3 or 4 month range after the robbery, I found Krav Maga
Mhm.
and did a lot of research into it and realized that this was what I really needed to focus on. And that started me on the path of Krav Maga. Um, there's a lot more, but we can get to that, as we move through this. But that's how I found Krav Maga.
So it was, in fact, it was a need. You found out that the things you learned and you trained was not enough for the situation you had to handle.
Yeah, I think context plays a huge role in how we think about martial sciences.
Mhm.
And I was never someone that wanted to be a fighter. I've done a few fights, I've done well, but that was nothing I ever really wanted to do. It's something you sometimes do as part of your martial science journey. However, what I realized after that robbery at gunpoint was I had to focus on the things that were more reality based. And um, I think it was important for me to understand that I had not clearly delineated between traditional martial arts for sport, which doesn't mean they're not violent and not fantastic, and martial arts who are just dedicated to sort of real world street violence. And that's kind of where I made my decision for Krav Maga.
Okay, and out of this decision, so well, after a long period of time, so you teach now and you decided to teach this. So what was your reason, your why you started to do that? I know a little bit that you don't do only that, but what was your why to start to teach Krav Maga to people?
Yeah, I would say that it was almost by accident. I had gone to Los Angeles at the training center there, and I wanted to know as much as I could about Krav Maga in the aftermath of the robbery.
Mhm.
And after I finished phase A, they told me I had to teach, and I was like, "Wait, I just wanted to come and learn." And they said, "No, if you come back, you have to be teaching." And I said, "Oh my gosh!" So I found an opportunity to teach Krav Maga at a local gym as a sort of a requirement of moving through the system. So my intention was never to teach. It was only for my personal sort of safety and my own edification in terms of understanding violence. Um, but it was such an ignition moment for me after the robbery, the realization that what I was engaging in was sort of a fantasy, and I needed to get into the real world. And I was so hungry to understand the information, to question it, to test it, to break it down, to reverse engineer it, that I agreed to find a place to teach so I could continue to learn. That's how that happened.
Okay, so it was more an obligation because you wanted to know more. And I think that's also really interesting for me. You always learn faster when you teach something. So it's also part of the game. Okay, but and that's really interesting because you do also your coaching program. So for me, Krav Maga is not only self-defense or defense against guns, but it's a lot more. It's also a mentality state and a way of life. What it is for you?
Yeah, Krav Maga is, to me, first and foremost, is a problem solving a tool.
Okay.
And at the seminar, we're going to talk a lot about um, why Krav Maga is a problem solving tool and how to look at it from that perspective within the context of violence. Now, you can look at it like in the coaching world within the context of growing personally, for instance. But for our purposes, the basic philosophy and the basic principles of Krav Maga is really just a logical problem solving tool.
Mhm.
And when we look at it that way, we kind of give ourselves enough emotional space to be able to look at a dangerous problem without personalizing it. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. And that's important for some of my students. Not all of them, but some of them come in and they're so intimidated by the idea of a weapons defense that they can't get out of their own way sufficiently to be able to do the defense without carrying a mindset of fear in the training. And so by understanding things from a principle perspective, from a philosophical perspective, and as a function of almost like a toolbox. These things allow people to see them more objectively and to look at them from across the room and say, "Oh, I see it now." So we'll be doing a lot of that within the framework of learning, or even discussing knife and handgun, long gun defenses.
Okay, that's really interesting because it's a point it was not on the plan, but I will ask it now. So here in Europe, we don't have a lot of not like in US gun attacks, okay?
Yeah.
But a lot of people think, and we see it a lot, that people say like, oh, but if someone comes with a gun, he will never come as close as you train. He will never, he will be prepared, and so on. What would you say to these people from your perspective?
Well, two things. I do understand that the U.S. has a lot more gun violence than, for instance, Luxembourg or Europe. Um, that's the case. However, I always find myself a little disappointed and sometimes irritated when people start saying that they know what some unknown assailant's going to do with some unknown weapon at some unknown time in some unknown context. For me, and for most people who are robbed at gunpoint, the gunman is very close. And
Mhm.
they're very close because they don't want to show the gun. They
Mhm.
don't want to make a scene. They don't yell, they talk quietly. When my During my robbery, the guy walked up, he put the gun about 12 inches from my chest. He said, Wallets, let's make this quick. And I think what the mistake we make in martial sciences, in the way that you've described it, or the people make mistakes, is they begin to believe that they know how a gunman or how someone wielding a knife is going to attack. And the answer is you have to be prepared for any circumstance. But the other answer is that there are ways to look at, through research, right,
Mhm.
how gun threats or gun attacks are typically carried out. If someone's 20 feet away and they start shooting at you, you're obviously not going to do a gun defense.
Of course.
But in my personal experience and the experience of my students who have been robbed at gunpoint, virtually every single one was very, very close. The last one that happened, the guy grabbed a guy getting out of his truck in his driveway at night after they were coming back from some sort of like fundraiser. He had one hand on his shoulder from behind. He had the other hand of the gun pressed against his neck. For me, it was 12 inches away. And I don't have any students in the last almost 30 years of training and teaching where they're like, well, I wanted to make a gun defense, but the guy was 20 feet away. It's just, at least in the US, it doesn't happen.
I'm pretty sure it neither happens here, but it's also the fact that a lot of people that are like, okay, but it will never be realistic to do a defense in this situation because he will be in a position of advantage. And that's something it's difficult to explain to people, that we always train out of a position of disadvantage as Krav Maga practitioner. So, but yeah.
Yeah, one of the things.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Go
Mark, go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
Well,
No,
one
no,
of the
no.
things we do here is we use the different types of guns with marking cartridges, and General Dynamics creates these guns. There's, I think, Unirex makes them as well, and they shoot a hard plastic round
I think
with mark. Yeah, simunition, right? Simunitions.
Yeah.
And we show our students how they can successfully make a gun defense. And we put the gun in there. It's usually instructor. We say, hey, put pressure on the trigger. If you see them move at the gun, pull the trigger. And everyone's always surprised that about 80% of the defenses that are made successfully. They're made successfully because people are following a core set of principles. And those core set of principles that we can get into later house or encapsulate, pardon me, so many powerful ways to think about Krav Maga training. Like, what's your initiating movement? What are your physical cues? What other things are you doing inside the defense to make sure that it's repeatable and that you can create muscle memory, so that under stress, when your mind says the command, the path to the gun is the same. That it's not telegraphed, and on and on and on. So I would say that I feel confident, given all the training we've done over the past 28 years, that people can and have made gun defenses in situations where their life literally hung in the balance.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing already, but because you have this experience, so it's really interesting. Okay, let's dive into the seminar in Luxembourg in Europe. So, what for you expect the most of the seminar? And yeah, first that, what you expect for the seminar?
Well, I hope we have a lot of people. I really want to share what has been the bulk of my professional life's work with the folks in Europe, my soon-to-be friends in Europe. I haven't been to Europe in probably the last 20 years, and I'm looking forward to coming back. What I want to bring outside of an examination of the gun and knife defenses we're going to do is a philosophical approach to training and to understanding each of the defenses, to make sure people understand the blueprint. And like, what's the initiating movement? What are your physical cues that tell you when to go and how to stack your movements? One of the things I love to talk about is how each defense relates to the principles that are embedded in the defense, and how each movement is part of a system first mentality for Krav Maga. So when I leave the seminar, I sort of promise people when I do seminars, you're going to be better at the defenses that you do, that I show you, but you're also going to understand them at a level that you've never understood them before, because we have a way of explaining it that is just unique and novel, and has been something that we've been working on, or I've been working on for almost 30 years. And I think people have a hard time maybe thinking or understanding what that all really means. But what it really means is that, and this is what I told a group I train once a quarter. They come in from all over the country and the world, and we train for a weekend at a time. And they said, well, what are we going to really do? And I said, what you're going to do is understand this at a level you've never understood it before. And it's going to feel, at least to me, right, because I'm here in this, like Christmas morning. And they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, the biggest and most exciting thing that happened to you as a kid on Christmas morning was a gift that was maybe unexpected and that gave you freedom, whether it was like a new bike or something like that. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't think I was going to get this. And the present only represents not only the surprise, but also the new freedom. And what I tell people is, it's going to be like Christmas morning, because we're going to take the information that you have and we're going to add to it in a way that you're going to start making discoveries. And those discoveries create new freedom in the way that you think about and train and teach Krav Maga.
Amazing. And so what is in for the participants? You answered already part of it, but we had discussions with people, and so our advanced people were like, yeah, but I know the techniques. Is it for me? And beginners were like, yeah, but it's two days of 6 hours. Will I resist to the physical exercise? Is it not too much experience for me? So what you would say to these people?
Yeah. So I referred to the group I'm training with right now, and they come from all different places. They're different ages, they're different
Yep.
physical capacities. I've never taught a seminar where I tried to run people into the ground. In fact, what I try to do is get them warmed up as fast as I can, and I get them moving at a moderate pace. And the reason I do that is this. We call this the checklist. We'll go over the defense. We'll talk about the components of the defense. We'll talk about how the components of the defense fit. We'll talk about something called the domino effect. In other words, if you're making a movement in Krav Maga, then that movement should be optimally suited to deliver the objective for which it's designed. But it should also facilitate in a powerful way the next movement. And if that facilitation isn't there, then the defense is broken. And the defense is sometimes broken because the weight's in the wrong foot or the platforms didn't turn the way they're supposed to. And we get into that in the seminar. We talk about some of the most prevalent challenges with performing the defense in the most powerful way. And people unlock this stuff by just having people come around and say, hey, you have too much weight in your left foot there? Can you turn your hip like this way? Is the hip closed? And they begin to go, oh my gosh. So whether someone's new and they feel like they're not in great shape, or whether someone thinks they know the defense, they're all going to be surprised by how much they learn. Whether they learn stuff that they didn't think they could learn because of the way we're introducing it, or they're unlocking new things about defenses they already know. That I promise you that's going to be the case for whoever shows up. And that's why we do the guarantee. People are dubious. They're like, and the world is sort of a cynical, pessimistic place sometimes. They're like, oh, it's another whatever. And it's like, no, we're going to guarantee you this experience. And the reason is we spent the better part of 3 decades, 30 years, sort of unraveling all this. So my advice to everyone is you're covered by a guarantee. You have nothing to lose by coming to the seminar and just an immense amount to gain. I would truly invite you to come see what we're doing and understand in a deep level why we do what we do. I think you're going to find it to be pretty exhilarating.
Awesome. And if you would have three can't miss things for the seminar, if you have someone who is thinking about signing up, what would you give him the three can't miss things?
Yeah, I think the first thing is philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that in an ethereal sort of like trying to hold sand in my hand, right? What I mean is they're going to leave with a philosophy around Krav Maga that better informs the way they train Krav Maga, which may be slightly different in terms of how they teach it if they're an instructor. So we're going to build a philosophy that is personalized. And I think people are often caught off guard by how powerful that can be and how much that resonates with them as they move through the seminar. The second thing is we're going to do a bunch of drills, but there's 2 drills that I want to teach that really get the repetition going for elements of Krav Maga. One is we call it Da Vinci, or the Vitruvian Man, the guy that stands with his arms out and his feet wide. And it represents someone who's standing in that position, and you're moving from control position around the person, right? 360 degrees. And the idea is to understand in control where the next control position to the left and right of you. And the reason is that control position may be the position you have to establish if you lose control. Now, there are other options. You can push away, you can make attacks, and I'm not saying there aren't, but this is a drill that helps you to repeat not only the different control positions, but also understand what's available to you left and right. We also have a drill called joint lock flow. It's a little trickier, but you practice all the major joint locks in Krav Maga. And when I have my students do it, they do it in sub 5 seconds. And they do 8 or 9 joint locks, boom, 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 boom. And the repetition really is powerful for taking knives and learning weapon retention and so on. And I think the last thing is what I alluded to earlier is you're going to have a blueprint. And you're going to have a blueprint to be able to say, I'm looking at this technique or this defense. I understand how the movements fit together. So I understand the domino or the cascading effect. Is it in place? Yes. What physical cues can I use to be most effective with this? Not only to ensure that I don't telegraph, but that this is repeatable. And then what is the initiating movement? So the blueprint says, what do you need to do and how? Then it's physical cues that stack and combine movements to make them ultra optimal and effective. And then the initiating movement, which fires off everything. And that little blueprint right there for people is going to be a powerful way to think about evaluating and training and teaching techniques and defenses.
I think after this, people can't wait to come to your seminar.
I hope so. I hope so. I want to tell them myself. When I first started Krav Maga, I had been robbed at gunpoint, and I was very interested in learning it for myself. Everyone said we have to teach, so I started teaching, and I quickly learned that when you're teaching, students don't have a lot of context for this either, and so I started building at first metaphors and helping people to understand movements based on movements they make in their daily lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the snowball that turned into the bigger snowball at the bottom of the mountain, where we started trying to identify everything we were doing, why we were doing it. And what I tell people is this: if I show you a defense in Krav Maga and I tell you to do, I'm going to pick a number, 7 things in that defense.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask me a question about any of those 7 things and I'll have a good answer for you. And I would just tell them, if you're doing something and you don't have a good answer for it, you need to ask yourself, why are you doing it? Right? So for people that are dubious or that are a little cynical about this, the reason we do the guarantee is to make sure that we're able to touch as many people as we can, and that we can share as much as we can. This was not my default mode. My default mode was to keep everything I was doing secret for about 25 years. And
Okay.
I had high level people from LA that would say, hey, I want to come train with you. And we've done some of that. And finally, they called and said, would you please be a part of a team that is sort of filling some gaps in the leadership team at Worldwide? And I said, boy, if I do that, I'm going to have to share everything. And Joe called me and he said, look, you're no spring chicken, which wasn't very nice. But he said to me, you gotta make sure, because he'd been with me for one session, right?
Okay.
And he's picked my straight stab in 10 minutes, straight stab defense. And he said, you got to share this stuff. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So here we are. Now I'm part of the worldwide staff. And instead of being sort of insular and protective of the information, my goal now is to share it with as many sort of earnest Krav Maga practitioners as I can.
Okay. But must be difficult to go from stealth mode to open mode, no?
It was a perspective change, right?
Okay.
And what I tell so many people, this: it's like when you're guarded or when you're sort of closed off, you're in perception mode. You're perceiving something that could happen. But when you shift your perspective and you see the bigger picture and you understand that people really need this and people can save their lives, and you don't have to just train the people in Houston, but you can give this to other people. And what really got me over the hump was Darren. Darren and I have been friends for 20 years. And in fact, if I can tell a quick story, I was doing a weekend course with a bunch of 3rd degree black belts. And about a day in, they walked over to me and one of them said, I can't imagine how much money you spent doing private lessons with Darren to know all the things that you know. And I said, it was a guy named Harry. I said, Harry, it will surprise you to know that I've never done a private lesson with Darren. But here's what I did. I've had hundreds of hours of conversations with him. And he used to do seminars for me and my team all the time, big seminars, 200 people. And I would put my instructors in the crowd and tell them to support and I would just watch and take notes. And I developed what I call now a process for noticing. And when I would talk to Darren, I would sort of quiz him around, like, I saw this, or I saw that, or I'm doing this. And our discussions were more philosophical. But when you combine that with that deep need to understand because of the robbery at gunpoint, like, Mark, there's not a day in probably 28 years I haven't thought about Krav Maga. It's a weird thing to say. I might need, to talk that out with somebody. But there hasn't been. I think about my students. I think about what I'm going to teach. I think about new ways to do things. Not so much new ways. New ways to understand it, new ways to make it repeatable, to make it more powerful, to understand it at a deeper level. And one of the guys was saying, well, we want to get into wrestling. And I said, guys, you're talking about horizontal development. And I'm not against that, but you have to vertically develop first. So if you know everything about Krav Maga, if you're a deep Krav Maga, then go do something else. But until you have that vertical development, right, you're doing yourself a disservice. And so I would just tell everyone that it wasn't that hard to make the shift once Darren told me that EME had picked him to bring Krav Maga to the United States, and that EME saw it as a gift to the people in the United States. And I thought, look, if EME's giving gifts and Darren's delivering gifts, I should probably make this, you know what I'm saying? I shouldn't keep under the hood anymore, right?
Of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay. And last question for this. So what is the mental approach you encourage people and students to face uncomfortable and high pressure drills and situations? How you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I do like the idea of higher pressure drills, of training under stress, and we can do some of that. It depends on the group and how well they're adhering to the checklist. You know, what do I do first, second, third, fourth? But I would just say this: as a mental or as a mindset for approaching Krav Maga in all of your training, whether it's slow or whether it's fast or whether it's thoughtful or under stress, suspend your disbelief around what's possible. And what that means is don't think that you can't do this well in 4 hours. Just don't have an expectation that limits your training. And two, adopt a posture of non-judgment, which just means when you make a mistake, learn from it, shake it off, and keep going. Don't get caught in a cycle of like negativity. So if people can just do those two things, and that's the way I'm going to approach this in our seminar in Luxembourg, and it's the way that I approach my own training. In fact, I tell people, like, I made so many mistakes at Krav Maga, but I was so thirsty to understand it and learn it and embody it that it was just like, what can I learn? And I kept going. I never even thought about what it said about me. And your mistakes don't really say anything about you unless you allow them to define you. So for everyone who's going to do this seminar, you know, adopt this mindset of suspend your disbelief. Don't anything's possible today and tomorrow, you know, during the seminar, and don't bring any judgment to it. Learn from your mistakes, keep going, be excited, have fun, and see where it leads you.
Being open-minded. Could we?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Cool. Okay, let's do something. I call it rapid fire and fun. I give you
Okay.
I give you. I say something and you answer in one word or two, three. Okay.
Okay, this sounds like it's fun for you.
So
Go
in
ahead.
one word, describe your Krav Maga journey so far.
Unbelievable.
Your favorite training exercise.
A straight stab drill, where it's constant straight stabs.
Okay, interesting. A guilty pleasure snack after a tough session.
A strawberry protein shake with a little honey.
Who's someone in the Krav Maga world you would love to bring to Luxembourg after your summit?
That's a good question. So, I mean, the obvious answer would be Darren Levine. I have a funny answer, though. The funny answer is when I was training for my black belt, there was one person that didn't get run off because she really wanted to learn it too. Her name was Nancy Patu, and she is a math teacher in a high school. And she's 4'11". She's not in great shape. She's a little pear-shaped. And she just never gave up. And she became an instructor. And for me, like, it's not as important that people see that I can do Krav Maga. You know, I'm 6'1", 260. Nancy's 4'11" and not athletic. And I think she's more of an inspiration to people than I am. So maybe Nancy Patu is the answer to that question.
Okay. That's also the spirit of Krav Maga, to do it for people to show it with people who have not the physical aptitude of a high level training sports athlete. That's it.
Yes, 100%.
Okay. So CJ, thank you very much for this interview. It was really a pleasure and really interesting. So for all the people who listen and look at this, don't forget, please sign up for this seminar, the 28th and 29th of June. There will be a lot of people, I hope, from Europe, all over the world, perhaps also. And if you have any questions, let us know. Send us a message. We put underneath the link with the website so you can register for the seminar. And yeah, any last tips from your side?
I don't have a last tip, but I do want you to know that I'm pushing forward to get the book finished so I can bring some copies with me. So
Perfect.
a little teaser on a book that I'm finishing now.
Okay. By the way, can I ask you what's your relationship with Mark Divine? Because I read his books and he's pretty famous for me. So yeah.
Yeah, Mark and I run a program called Sheepdog.
Okay.
Mark actually wrote the foreword to the book that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I wrote it. I read it. So I was
Okay.
like, wow,
Yes.
okay.
So Mark runs SEALFIT and Unbeatable Mind.
Yeah.
I'm an Unbeatable Mind coach, among other certifications, and um, I actually hosted Mark and one of his teams that he runs for a shooting course last summer. And he and I have run sheepdog courses for a long time, several years now. But he wanted like this private course and told me what he wanted, and so we did a bunch of fun stuff. So um, I think I can call Mark a friend, or we're very, very friendly. We've done a lot of business together. We've run several courses together, and um, he was one of the few people that I wanted to learn from when it came to coaching certification, because I didn't want to, talk about the wind blowing and the wind chimes jingling. I wanted to hear, coaching from a different perspective, and commander of SEAL Team 3 was probably a better choice for me.
Okay, CJ, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Was great to have you with us. Guys, don't forget, register for this seminar. I'm pretty sure it will be just amazing. And see you soon. You will find the link in the bio. Thank you very much.